the general thing for gut health for the average person would be, one, chewing their food. It makes such a difference with bloating. Digestion starts in the mouth. Another big thing is reducing stress. And then diversity. One of the best things to do for our gut is to eat a more diverse diet. You know, maybe you've never cooked with aubergine before, you've never cooked with fennel, and just looking up a recipe with that vegetable in and incorporating that in. That's a really nice way of just trying out new things, making food more exciting, but also getting that diversity in.
Madeleine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
How would you define hormone health?
Ooh, it's a big question, but I would say hormone health is kind of like so many things. It's about being in balance. And it's not always obvious to see if you've got hormonal health, but a big indicator, especially for women, is a regular period. So a lot of people have irregular periods, and this can be quite an outward sign of, you know, like hormone disruption. But I think lots of things can be, you know, weight gain, weight loss, skin conditions, you know, so many things can be a marker of like an imbalance in your hormones. And I think so many people are struggling with it because of modern life. Modern life's incredibly stressful. And I think when we're really stressed, a lot of our hormones kind of shut down. We don't think it's safe to reproduce. We don't think it's safe to function in the way that we do. So that might mean that you skip periods, or it might mean that you are gaining weight, or it could show up in lots of different ways. It's quite a complicated kind of subject to pinpoint because there's lots of different hormones and each one does something different. But I would say a lot of people are struggling with fertility, periods, hormone regulation. And I think a lot of that is to do with their diets, but it's also to do with stress. It's also to do with how many kind of endocrine disruptors we have in our environment, like the air we breathe. You know, women, we put on like so many products onto our skin, onto our hair every single day. And of course, it helps us look beautiful, but it does have an impact, a run-on impact. So I think, you know, it's looking at all these different parts of what we do and how they impact our hormones.
Yeah, it's kind of scary once you scratch the surface of, hold on, what's impacting my hormones? What is going inside my body? And it's very much an external manifestation of what's going on inside. And I heard a quote when you were talking about the modern world, and it was, you know, previously in, I guess, olden times, life was hard physically for our bodies, but it was easier for our minds. Whereas now it's a lot easier for our bodies, but it's a lot harder for our minds and our souls, because there's a lot going on that would spike our stress. But, you know, we've got a washing machine, we've got a dishwasher, we have all of these easy things. You know, everything's automated. It's kind of scary. However, we've replaced that time-saving item we filled it in, you know, with lots of other things, which has enabled a lot of opportunities for a lot of different things. But also, as you say, the modern world causes a lot of stress. And I guess diving into the hormone aspect, when you say hormone, I think, you know, periods, like that is a very big manifestation, as you say, you know, our period cycle as women. But what actually are hormones? Are they like indicators of our emotion? Are they a science inside our body, or what actually is a hormone?
I mean, hormones are produced by our body to regulate things within our body. And I think, yes, you're right. They are connected to our emotions. They can make us feel more anxious, more hungry. So yeah, they're very much related to kind of everything in our body. And I think we know often during our cycle, we might get a bit more hungry before our period comes. We might get a bit more grumpy. You know, hormone fluctuations definitely affect all different things in our life. But I think, you know, we can definitely break down like different things to regulate your hormones. But I think definitely having a look at your period is a really, really great place to start, because that is something that you can kind of look at week by week, what's going on in your body, how it's changing, how, you know, your hormones are being impacted. And I think the more and more people I'm speaking to, the more people aren't getting periods or having 3 months between their periods. And it's roughly, we want our cycle to be 28 or 26 to 34 days. That's considered like regular. So if you're anywhere between there, but anything outside of that is considered irregular. So it's quite good to kind of have that as a marker to then kind of work from.
And as a nutritionist, obviously you'll zoom into the diet aspect of our wider life, which, everything impacts it. And you kind of indicated, we've got sleep, we've got stress, but also the diet is a huge piece of the pie, pun not intended, of our lifestyle and what actually goes into the hormones. So how do you approach that? Where do you begin? What's step one of a nutritionist with a patient?
I mean, it really depends on what their goal is and what they're coming in for. But I think one of the best things that I always look at is like, what are you having for breakfast? Because I think sometimes it can be really overwhelming to change like everything and be like, I need to change, if you're someone that's not exercising to exercising, not eating vegetables to eating vegetables, like all of that can be quite complicated. So I think starting your breakfast with protein, fibre, and fats is like a game changer for hormone balancing, sugar, you know, balancing your blood sugar levels, for making you feel full, for not getting those energy dips at 11 a.m. So if you can fill your breakfast with these three things, this really makes a difference. And when you're kind of thinking about that, you might not know what that looks like. But say, for example, you start your day with like jam and toast, which is very delicious, but you often might feel good. And then at like 10, 11 a.m., you're like, oh my God, I need a coffee. Oh my God, I need some sugar. Oh my God, I need another XYZ. So if you, for example, swap that to like scrambled eggs on toast, and then you added in some sort of like vegetables in there, or like some chickpeas in there for some fiber, or sprinkled some seeds on top for healthy fats, suddenly you've got this much more nutrient dense meal where you feel fuller, you're nourishing your body. And I think, so much of us are living on these blood sugar level roller coasters where we eat and then we feel rubbish, and then we eat and we feel rubbish. And we're kind of, just constantly snacking and fueling ourselves. And actually, we should be able to just eat 3 meals a day, maybe one snack, especially if you're active. And that should satisfy us. I think actually eating full meals, that's so much better for us. It also cost less because you're not buying loads of different snacks and things throughout the day. And it also means that you can crack on with the rest of the day because you're not constantly fueling yourself or going out to get something else. And we can be more efficient in whatever we like to spend our days doing. But I think that's a really, really good way to start. And, if you're having a fruit smoothie for breakfast, add in some protein powder, add in some nut butters, add in some chia seeds for fiber, like just adding things in. I'm a big believer in crowding in rather than cutting out, because I think the minute you say to yourself, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, you just want it so much more, don't you? Like, it's just like an innate human thing. So I think the minute we put restrictions on ourselves, the minute it feels like a chore. Whereas I think healthy eating and living should be pleasurable, it should be fun, it should be something that you look forward to doing. And there's so many different ways of doing it. So I think, having that positive mindset's really important.
And also, you mentioned the blood sugar, like peaks and troughs, but I think
Mhm.
that we probably would blame that quite a lot on our emotions. Oh, I'm just feeling really tired today. I'm just feeling really cranky today. I just feel, I have overwhelm, and then I have this, fatigue that I'm carrying. But actually, it's so linked with our food. And I think when we view food, we view it as, oh, I should eat healthily because then I'm not going to put on weight, and then I'm not going to, have too much sugar. I'm not going to have all of this. But actually, it's going to do a lot for our brain. It's going to do a lot for the time that we spend overall. We don't, as you said, we don't have to run out to get like food and things like that. And it's actually a net benefit in a lot of practical ways, which is quite an interesting conversation, rather than you must eat this because otherwise you are an unhealthy person and you have to carry that label. It's like, no, actually, it's going to improve your life, and it's going to improve a lot of different aspects of your life. And I think going back to kind of the hormone health thing, I guess as women, talking about hormones, it's the core. It is the reflection of what's going on inside. Our periods are a massive reflection physically of what is going on inside. If we don't get our periods each month, hold on, what's up with our body? Like biologically, if we go back to that, you know, it's so that you can't reproduce because you're not as fertile in that month. Because if you bring a baby into this world, you aren't in a safe place as your body to care for it, which sounds pretty savage when you say it like that, but that's what our body's saying. And it's very severe when you kind of state it like that. But I guess that is the severity of our hormone health and the reflection that the period has. And if we aren't getting our period, it is pretty serious because that's our body's natural way of flowing. So it's quite scary, actually, when it's stated so obviously, because, we can kind of suggest, oh, well, it's good if you do this. And if you don't do that, it's not as good because you're not as healthy. But actually, when you bring into, hold on, you're actually not going to be doing, like, your body's not going to be performing its monthly cycle, which is very much part of our core biology. It's kind of scary.
Absolutely. And, I don't think we need to feel scared about it. This happens to lots of people. And I think we should just feel empowered, like that, okay, this is our body showing us. It's like, when you have eczema or something, it's like, this is your body showing you that there's inflammation, there is an autoimmune condition going on, and it's showing you that you need to make a change. And I think, I got into health and wellness through my own journey with having really bad digestive issues and was really bloated. And, I didn't have some dramatic weight loss. I didn't need to lose a lot of weight to become healthy. For me, health was about not feeling bloated all the time, not feeling knackered all the time. Like we said, regular periods, not having, hair falling out, all these sorts of symptoms that can come from not looking after yourself, whether that's your nutrition, whether it's your lifestyle, your stress, all these sorts of things. And I think you're right. Sometimes when we think about food, we just think about weight and weight loss. And actually, it's just so much more. The way that you eat affects how you sleep, how you live, all these different things. And I think it's so important to think about that. And so often I feel like I'll be like, oh, I'm hungry or I'm tired on this. And it's like, no, I'm just dehydrated. Like, I just haven't drunk enough water. And then you drink water and you're like, oh yeah, I feel so much better. And I think, talking about hydration, like even just, I feel like not many of us have that much awareness of looking at like our pee every time we go to the loo. But this is like a great indicator of like what's going on in our body as well. Like you want it to be like a really pale yellow, but so often like it will be like a dark yellow or like quite a bright yellow or something. And again, that's another indicator of just like you are not hydrated enough. And again, I kind of urge people just to be curious about this. It's not making judgments on themselves if they've not got the right color pee. It's just saying, oh my God, you know what? I really need to drink a few more glasses of water or more herbal teas. And life is so incredibly dehydrating in terms of people drink so much coffee, which is really dehydrating. Booze is really dehydrating. So we really do need to kind of up our hydration levels throughout the day. And I think that's another, if we're looking at outward signs, like the period is a good outward sign. When we go to the loo, that's a good outward sign. And these are just really good like signals that our body's saying like, we need a change. We need you to help us. And that's sometimes the good thing about our body. It often does show us little signs. It's just whether we're ready to listen or not.
And they're also warning signs. They're not, hold on, this is drastic. There'll be different manifestations if we let it get to that point. But it's reversible. If we actually take action and we examine it and drink more water, therefore we're going to be more hydrated. Maybe we need to add a tiny bit of salt into our water. I love that tip. It's so helpful because, suddenly the water's actually being absorbed into your system rather than just flushing through like a nice little water slide or whatever. And I think that those tips are so helpful. And as you said, it's not about judgment at all. It's actually trying to work out the conversation of what do we need to do if we are a fairly healthy person and we understand that. But then a lot of the advice is for the drastically unhealthy or the people who are suffering with, really more severe difficulties and conditions, like eating disorders and all of these things, which are really serious in their own way. But then there's a lot of people out here who actually aren't suffering from them, but they still are trying to navigate, okay, what do I do? What do I eat? And where's the middle ground? I think is kind of the journey that I feel like I'm on right now with this podcast. Like, what is the middle ground for people who are trying to live in a normal life? Is there such a thing as a normal life? A balanced life, and actually trying to work out, okay, so what should we really do? What are the indicators? And I think I read an article on Healthline, which I think summarizes the key indicators of balancing our hormones. So protein at every meal. I think we've covered a lot of that. I've had a lot of chat about protein on this podcast, and I think hopefully we get where we're at with that one. Again, regular exercise. I think we got that. You know, it's a really important thing. We understand that. Moderate weight regulation, again, quite obvious. Quality sleep, again, we got that one. And then gut health is the one that I want to dive into a little bit more, because it's very much present on social media. Gut health, you need to do this, drink this, don't do this. Okay, but what does gut health mean? What are we looking for? Where is the middle ground, again, for these people who maybe aren't suffering hugely, but also want to prioritize it, want to help it? What's your view and definitions on gut health? How do you approach it, Madeleine?
I think that's a great question, because I think you're right. Sometimes gut health, it's like for people with IBS or people with this, but actually everyone needs to look after it. I would say a well functioning gut is someone who is like not always bloated. Obviously, sometimes you do just get bloated naturally and like you overeat or, you know, something. So not always bloated. Again, look, I feel like we're talking about so much about the toilet stuff, but like doing a poo regularly, like that's really important. And like if you haven't done a poo for like 4 days, that's not good. Like that's not a good sign. You know, you want to be going every day. Being able to like tolerate and digest things well, and not kind of constantly having like intolerances and all sorts of things to different foods. But I think gut health is so important. One, because it's where most of our immune system lives. 70% of our immune system lives in the gut. I think it's really important because we've learning more and more about the brain gut axis, which is like the sort of little messaging system between our brain and our gut. And we've always known about it because when we fancy someone, we feel like butterflies, or when we're nervous about an exam, we feel sick to the stomach. So I think we've all got that concept of actually what goes on in my brain affects my digestive system. And I don't know if you ever get this, but like whenever I'm about to do like a speech or like something important, I always need the loo, like need to go for a wee, because like my body's just like like panicking. But yeah, I think the general thing for gut health for the average person would be, one, chewing their food. It is so important that we chew our food. Most of us like eat on the go, we're eating in front of our desk, we're grabbing as we go. And I just want to like say that I work on this as well, because it is really, really hard. Because modern life makes you not slow down, and you sort of think you're like, well, why should I take 20 minutes to eat this meal? I could be doing all these million different things. But it makes such a difference with bloating. I feel like if anyone struggles with bloating or they want to kind of digest their food better, digestion starts in the mouth. So really, really chewing your food, breaking it down. And that really helps with bloating. It helps you absorb your food better. It also just, you don't have any teeth in the rest of your digestive system. So you really, really need to use them to kind of break down your food. Another big thing is reducing stress. Now, like everyone gets stressed for all different reasons and everyone suffers in a different way. But I think having some sort of tool that works for you that manages your stress, and that can be meditation, it can be journaling, but it could also be rock climbing, and it could be reading, and it could be yoga, like, but anything that kind of gets you out of your brain, gets you into more of a state of presence and calm, and doing that regularly to manage your stress levels. Because you know, modern life is so stressful, and just a ping of an email or a message or whatever is exciting and it's fun, but it is also causes stress to us. So I think managing your stress levels and also managing your life to reduce your stress is really important for your digestive health. And then diversity. We can see that like one of the best things to do for our gut is to eat a more diverse diet. So making sure that, you know, you're eating lots of different colorful fruits and vegetables. Like I feel like we all get in these like veggie ruts where we just buy like tomatoes and lettuce, or like whatever your go-to two veg are. and we buy them all the time every time we go in. So just trying to, like, maybe you've never cooked with aubergine before, you've never cooked with fennel, and just looking up a recipe with that vegetable in and incorporating that in. And I think that's a really nice way of just trying out new things, making food more exciting, but also getting that diversity in. And if you're looking at your plate, try and aim for like half of the plate to be full of veg, and like try and get 3 different colors in there as well. And then the rest of the plate, a quarter of it would be your protein and a quarter of it would be your carbohydrates, and then also get like a thumb size of healthy fats on top. That can be your nuts, your seeds, your olive oil, your avocado, and that's going to help with the absorption. So a lot of gut health we talk about, it's not what you eat, but it's what you absorb. And absorption is really important. So eating healthy fats with your meals helps with absorption, because a lot of the vitamins in our food are fat soluble, which means that they can't absorb without fat. So you could eat this big salad, all the different veggies, and think you're being so healthy, not adding olive oil onto it, but you're not going to get A, D, E, and K, which are all fat soluble vitamins in. So just adding in a bit of olive oil, some seeds, this is going to help with the absorption of the food that you're eating. So that's a really, really important thing to do. And then you talked a little bit about exercise, regular exercise, but that's also really important for gut health. Mobility, movement, even yoga and things like that are really good, because you do a lot of twists and you're kind of contorting your sort of torso in that way. And then all other things, everything in health links together. Like, good sleep is good for gut health, like exercise is good for gut health, getting into nature is good for gut health, and these things are all really good for hormonal health, overall health. Like, there's not often that many specific things that just relate to one thing, and that's fantastic, because otherwise you'll feel like you're doing all these different things. But I'm a big believer in like nailing the basics, and health has kind of gone in these 2 ways, where it feels like more and more people are getting more extreme and like ice bathing, saunaing, then doing tongue scraping, this, and then more and more people are becoming obese. Like, obesity is on the rise, and it seems kind of mental when in my bubble of world, like, everyone's getting more and more healthy and more extreme. But I think we're sort of, it's like almost like we're going like this. And I think actually, if people could just nail the basics of like keeping hydrated, moving their body, sleeping 8 hours, and eating more fruit and veg, like, we would be in another kind of world. But I think sometimes people don't want to do the basics. They just want to take the magic pill or go to like the new reformer class or something like that. And I think actually the basics are like where the magic is, personally, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's either so elaborate that we've got to quit our full-time jobs to be able to do this massive routine of health and fitness and wellness, or it is that other extreme. And I think it's been quite interesting, the conversation of health, and there's so many more directions. As I said, gut health has been talked about, hormone health has been talked about, all really great things, because clearly they're very fundamental to the core of our health and reflections of our health. But it's interesting that you kind of in your field actually can see, you're also very present on social media. You can see that there's almost 2 sides of extremism of health. And then where does everyone else go in the middle? Because there's people who do not drink alcohol at all anymore. I think then the movement of anti-alcohol and sober curious and so on is super interesting, because I'm in my 20s. A lot of people I know don't really drink and don't really, it's just not such a thing anymore. Even when I was at university, and everyone drank. Whereas I feel like it's very different now, even that small period of time. It's just completely changed. And I think, well, are people talking about it more? Is there more education on it? Is it a trend? Like, is it just because, it's the cool influencers are doing this or that or the other, and we all think, well, let's do that? Like, what do you think it is? Because it's such a thing. It's such a thing, this extremism. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's identity. I think everyone's trying to figure out who they are, and they figure out their identity through choosing these things. So I feel like everyone went vegan like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and it was like that became their identity. So their identity was being vegan. And then I think, like you said, the new thing is, oh, well, I don't drink and that's my thing. And I think we're all grappling in this world to kind of figure out who we are. And what we do is maybe we see someone, like you said, maybe it's an influencer, someone we admire who said, my life was so shit, yada, yada, yada. And then I stopped drinking, or then I, stopped eating meat or something. And then suddenly I was happy. And I think people see that story and they cling on to it and they say, oh, wow, I will try this and then I'll be happy. And I think there is amazing merit in all these things, but I think what we always have to remember is, unless we do the work internally, we are just the same person with the same thoughts, the same insecurities, but just with a different badge on us. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. You move to a different side of the world thinking that your problems won't come with you, but they do. And I think, what I think I would love to see more in society, and this might be slightly off topic, but is like a bit more self-reflection on people. But I feel like everyone's like, cut the toxic friend out, cut the dickhead boy out of your life, blah, blah, blah. But there's not that much of like, okay, well, I contributed to this. So how do I change? Because you can't change someone else. You can't change that friend who's not very nice to you, or that guy who wasn't very nice to you. You can change yourself, and you can take accountability to being a co-creator of whatever situation you are in your life. And I feel like I would love to see more of that. And maybe that's slightly off topic, but I think it does relate to health as well. It's just like, okay, what's my part to play in this? And like, where can I improve and where can I, change and have that as less external, less once I've got this gym set or once I've got this new water bottle, and a bit more around like an internal shift. I don't know if that's too deep, but
No,
it's definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot more recently.
yeah. That's no, that's super interesting. And I think that we literally talked about how the brain is so connected to the body. And all of this is part of it. We're all navigating it. We're all trying to find our identity. I think you're bang on. How do we define ourselves in this age where we can be anything and anyone? It's quite disorientating. And I was talking actually with my husband about this. Like he was kind of saying the point where like everybody thinks that they're right. If we have an argument with someone, we all think we're right, and we generally will deduce that the other person is wrong. And it doesn't matter whether you are right or the other person's right, but we all kind of think that we are right in what we say. And then therefore we kind of approach this with like, we're kind of fighting everybody. And I think another thing I think of in like, it's basic psychology is you walk into your kitchen and there's stuff everywhere. And your brain is suddenly like cluttered because it's having to go through all of these different barriers to kind of like eliminate all of these things on the kitchen counter, say, to just clear it in your mind. And it just takes a lot more energy. Whereas if you walk into a tidy kitchen, you just feel this calm because it's all tidy, you can see everything. Whereas, there's that difference of how you approach it. So if we approach a situation with effectively all this mess and clutter that we're kind of fighting, we're going in aggressive and we are right and we're going to, prove to everybody that we are right and they are wrong. And it doesn't really matter that you have to change your viewpoint. I'm not saying that, but just come in with less aggression and less judgment and think, okay, well, I'm going to do what I think is best for me. And I'm going to try and show this lack of judgment for other people. But I just think we can tire ourselves out with this fighting that actually doesn't achieve anything. Do you know why? Why are we coming with this kind of aggression at other people saying, well, I'm not going to drink alcohol? Or why are we getting cross at people who still are drinking alcohol? And that's just, I'd say that was like the latest trend. Veganism was something that people were, oh my goodness, but this person says they're vegan, yet, they had this thing with 2% calcium, which is from milk in it. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of aggravation.
So
And
true. It's so true. I remember I used to get like hate on my page, like, you just murder that animal, like blah blah. And now like everyone's like slabbing beef onto their plates like every day of the week. And I just feel like I'm with you. I think that thing that your husband said is such a good thing. And I don't know if you've done any therapy before, but that's a lot of what therapists are very helpful and help you see is like you've got your perspective on a situation, but that person's coming with like their childhood wounds, their, the way that they grew up, their morals, their beliefs, and whatever they were doing, whether it was right or wrong, they thought it was the right thing in that moment to do. And maybe you could reflect on it and go, that probably wasn't the best thing to have said or done or whatever, but in that time, you, with all the knowledge that you had, you made the best decision you could. And I think, yeah, I think there is a lot of, yeah, judgment, and I just think it's not helpful. I think we've all got to navigate things. And I think, yes, let's bring this back to alcohol. Like, yes, alcohol is a poison for our bodies. Also, it's really fun. And like, that's not to say you can't have fun without alcohol. I just want to premise to say that. But like, I still have alcohol in my life because one, I really like the taste of it. And two, sometimes it does facilitate experiences that wouldn't be there without it. And I want to live life to the max. And like, unfortunately, like we are all going to die at some point. And I think that, at this moment in time, we know this much about nutrition and stuff. But just think about like 20 years ago when we were like, I mean, you're younger than me, but like it was like, don't eat fat, only drink diet drinks, only eat diet like yogurts or whatever. And that was the thing. And then it's changed so much. So like, we don't know what it's going to be in 10, 20 years time. It might be completely different. It might be like, it's now big in protein, but like, it might be like only eat seeds or something. We just don't know. We don't know what it's going to be. So I feel like if we can, as we said before, like have a bit more moderation, not be too extreme in any areas. One, we're sort of like making sure we're okay for the future when everything changes again. But two, we're just kind of also living life well, because I do think that, we do know, but we don't know how much, as in like we know food affects us, but we don't know if food affects us more than meditation, or exercising affects us better than sleeping or something like that. So we know these things are all good for us, but we can't necessarily say that like just if you drink that's eradicating all the other things. So I think at the end of the day you have to kind of just take stock of yourself and be like, if booze is making me not sleep, it's being really bad for my relationships, it's making me not work well, then probably it's not right for you. But if you can find balance and have it in your life every now and then I don't see why it has to be taken out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, we're in this middle ground of we're assuming in this conversation that alcohol is not something that you have substance abuse from, that is not causing all these dire health things. Because then, of course, maybe take a look in the metaphorical mirror for that one, and it might be something that you need to address in a very different conversation. But also, just as you said, we can take the negative effects of, okay, well, alcohol is bad for you and it is a poison. Your body treats it as a poison and a toxin. However, is not drinking alcohol but being very, very lonely because you can't hang out with your friends, is that actually going to lead to a longer life? Is it going to lead to a happier life? Do we just view longevity as the golden ticket and it should be a healthy yet quite empty life, but we live till we're 90? Like, is that better? It's quite weird, this striving for longevity and almost depriving a lot of the journey, and also the stress that can come with that. Because again, once you treat it as, well, I can't do that, then suddenly there's this barrier because your mind's like, well, I do want to do that because you told me I can't. Plus, you probably have to go out of your way in many ways, depending on what we're talking about. But say you go to a restaurant with your friends, but you're on a very specific diet plan, you're going to get stressed because you either have ordered something that you can only eat a certain amount of because it's a certain amount of calories, or you can't eat anything. And it's just, what actually is cancelling it out? I think that's quite an interesting conversation that I've not heard actually on social media. But I think it's all that's kind of in the back of our minds, is this equation of, well, if I don't do this, can I do this? Or is that actually that bad? But then hold on, there's this massive loneliness epidemic that we're all feeling isolated. We're all feeling like identity. We're getting our identity from social trends, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
What's happened to our own identities? Where is that being lost in this map of wellness and longevity?
I think it's such a good conversation. I'm totally with you. And I think people are also living their lives for other people. They're going on holidays based on what's going to photograph well enough. They're going to restaurants based on what's going to photograph well enough. They're wearing outfits based on what's going to be photographed well enough. That's not to say that they might also love those outfits, love that hotel, and love that restaurant. But like, I just feel like that's such a lack of authenticity of people choosing how they want to live. And I think I definitely know, I've been in the wellness industry for 12 years. It's, been my whole entire career. And I definitely went through a period of time where I was so anal about being in bed at like 9:30 p.m. and I wasn't drinking, and I would have to say I'm so much more balanced now, where like I'll eat ice cream and croissants and not all the time, but like much more balanced, probably drinking more, and I've probably have a better I'm probably more toned and stronger and look more healthy than I did before, because I think, like you said, I'm not so stressed about getting it right all the time. And I think that was constantly like, oh, I'm not going to go to that party because I won't be home in time, or, oh, I'm not going to eat there. Or like every time people would ask me for dinner, I would be like looking at the menu, what can I eat? And now like I feel like I just turn up and have a good time. And I think I really do believe there's something in that. And I think that it can trap you, and I do think there has to be some sort of balance. I think what's been really nice that wasn't around when I started is social wellness, so like running clubs, paddle, exercise classes with friends and things like that. I feel like it's become, the social element of it has become so much more, which I think is such a fantastic thing, because we are social creatures and we do like doing social things. I think it's just getting that balance. Like you don't want to just be boozing with your friends. And probably we went from that one thing where we only socialize through alcohol. Well, at least in my day, you only socialize through alcohol. That's how you saw your friends. And then if you weren't drinking, you just couldn't see them. Whereas I feel like we just need that balance of like, maybe sometimes it's dinner with drinks and maybe sometimes it's a Pilates brunch or whatever, but just not only doing one or the other.
Yeah, it is that social wellness, which is facilitating so much like fun and meeting new friends and like-minded people and community. And then that kind of spirals into a whole other thing, which just fills us up. And I think
Yeah.
you mentioned authenticity there. And I think that the lack of authenticity, when we feel like we're not being authentic, it's almost like a rot inside us that decays us, because it can be a tiny bit, but I genuinely think it's that serious. Like that sounds so drastic, but it's just so painful, and you just then don't know who you are and your identity. And I think it's hard growing up. Like, who do you want to be? Where do you want to be? We can live anywhere in the world. We
So
can
true.
move to the other side of the world in an instant, and we can work from anywhere, and that's amazing. But also trying to find that authenticity of, where actually are you? Are you looking ahead all the time, or are you looking round you? And not being so fixated on the little tiny things, and thinking, well, who do I want to be? Because ultimately, when we look back on our life at whatever age we make it to, like, it's only us who's going to be looking back at it. It's not going to be all these people who, as you said, we could be living our life through or for, or any of these things vicariously. Like, that's kind of like simplifying it. And I don't mean to say that in like a judgmental way at all. I mean to say, like, to simplify it, like, take the pressure off yourself. No one pays attention to us as much as we do. Like, everybody kind of fixates on ourselves. And that's
So
really great because no one really cares that much. Like, how cool is that? We can kind of do what we want in a way, like, not saying act as an idiot, but it's free, you know?
yeah, it is. You're right. I think we kind of think that people are talking about us or thinking or judging all these things, and they might one time flick a comment, but really they're often only saying that about you because they're trying to make themselves feel good or reflect their life better or something. But I think most of the time, yeah, everyone is just thinking about themselves and what's going on with them. But I think, I don't know, like, how do you get back to who you truly are, what you truly want? Like, a lot of times people say, like, look at what you did as a kid. So like if you were really outdoorsy, or you were really creative, or you were always interested in whatever it was, like that's sometimes a really good indicator of like, before judgment, before, all these pressures were put on you, this was like your innate like love and passion. And like one of the things that I did when I was a kid is I always wanted to have a marshmallow shop, and it was called like Maddie's Marshmallows. And I was like, I'm going to have this stand and I'm going to sell marshmallows, because I just loved marshmallows as a kid. And in some ways, I know it's not exactly what I do, but there's that same sort of thing of like creating, sharing food, sharing passion. And I think, that's always a really nice, place to start. And I've got a 7-year-old son, and I've started writing down each year like what he's passionate about, what he's into, and what he wants to be when he grows up, so that when he's 18 he can have all these things of all the different little moments and things that he was at his most innocent, most innate self interested in being, before he gets told that he must be a doctor, a banker, an accountant, or whatever the job that you kind of get pushed upon. um yeah, I think that's a really lovely thing to kind of think about.
Yeah, that's a really, really lovely idea. And I think often we're pretty bang on, when we're younger about who we want to be and what we want to do. Like, we're pretty much spot on. And again, it's a pretty authentic way of seeing kind of who we are, because as you say, there's that lack of judgment. There's that kind of, you feel like G'd up with this freedom of I can be anything and anyone. And of course I can have, this amazing business that I want to start, because you don't have that kind of fear factor or other people, these doubts kind of coming in. So it's just kind of cool to actually look back on that. So you'll be very interested to see, I guess, how it works out for your son, and what maybe he'll go back to what he wants to be, age 6, and he knows himself pretty well by then. That's quite a cool way of thinking of it. And you mentioned the use of healthy fats, and then the olive oil and avocado. And something I wanted to ask you about was the Mediterranean diet, and I guess lifestyle as well. And why do people strive after the Mediterranean diet? I mean, obviously, tomato, mozzarella, and olive oil in Tuscany is pretty hard to beat. But it's not quite the same when we, go to Tesco's and get some tomatoes. It just does not hit the same way, does it? But is it a better diet? Is it healthier? Why is there this kind of fixation on this certain sort of lifestyle?
I think it's had the most like research done by it. It's definitely something that's been researched as a diet, probably because of, yeah, longevity, people living longer, having more healthier kind of biometrics. Um, Kind of linking it back to hormones, the Mediterranean diet is very much seen as like the best diet for fertility. So if anyone listening is kind of thinking about their fertility, and that might not be like immediately now, but for the future, um, the Mediterranean diet is kind of seen as like the best way of eating for hormonal balance. And again, hormonal balance can be linked to fertility, but as we've talked about before, like having a regular period is something that we should all be having during the age bracket of when we're supposed to have our period. So I think the Mediterranean diet is really diverse. That's what we talked about with gut health. So it's loads of different plants. So not just fruits and vegetables, but also legumes, lentils, chickpeas. It also has lots of protein in it, chicken, fish, meat, seafood. Um, as you said before, lots of olive oil, which is an amazing healthy fat and helps absorb all those vitamins. It's really good for like healthy skin, hair, nails. Also really good for lubricating your joints. It's also good for reducing inflammation. But then I think there's that aspect of the Mediterranean diet of lifestyle. So like sitting with your family and eating your food, eating in the sunshine, like you said, like you can eat a piece of melon in Croatia and be like, this is better than like eating a chocolate bar. It's so incredible. But when you eat melon from Tesco's, it's not the same. I feel like we're bagging on Tesco's. Tesco's great, but um, I think it is different. And I think that's an unfortunate thing of not living in a warmer climate, is fruit and vegetable is transported in, it doesn't taste as good. However, I do think the Mediterranean diet is a fantastic kind of more balanced approach as well. It's less extreme. It's not cutting out things. You know, you can adapt it if you don't particularly like X, Y, or Z, or you've got particular allergies. It's quite broad in what you're eating. And it is incredibly good for both hormonal and gut health. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan. I don't ever really like to label the sort of diet that I have, but I think if I was ever to kind of link it closely enough to something, it would be the Mediterranean diet, because it is such a fantastic kind of way of eating. And yeah, I think it also works for so many people as well. I think a lot of people enjoy that style of eating too.
Yeah, and then of course you get the excuse of going to the Mediterranean and testing out for a bit of, you know, what do they eat? I'm just going to do a bit of research here and enjoy that part of it. Um, and another thing listed on the Healthline indicators for hormonal health, which I want to ask you about, is having enough fiber, because there's been, of course, this massive conversation about protein. Women need more protein as they get older and they need to lift weights, and it's all in conjunction and it's really important. And we understand that. And I think there's very much a conversation and education around that, which is amazing. But then perhaps we're slightly neglecting the fiber part of including that into our diet. And why is fiber important? Well, we kind of know cereals will be high in fiber, vegetables can be high in fiber, but why that's not going to get us muscle? Why should we care about it?
Yeah, so I think it's something like only 10% of the population gets enough fiber in. So I think it's something that not many people are hitting. So the average amount is 30 grams of protein per day of fiber. And fiber is really important for your digestive health. It's very good for motility, so keeping things moving. It's really good for kind of increasing the microbiome in your gut health. And I think, yes, like you said, it's often in cereal. I wouldn't recommend cereal as a fiber source because fiber is just added in to a lot of it. It's not always naturally there. But oats, if you're just eating like rolled oats, they're a really good source of fiber. Things like beans, legumes, chickpeas, even just having a handful of them every single day in your lunches, you're going to like skyrocket your fiber intake. Obviously, fruits and vegetables also a really good source of fiber. But I think one of the biggest things is, it's just eating more plants. The more plants you eat tend to increase the amount of fiber that you have. And again, when I'm saying plants, I'm talking fruits, veg, but I'm talking nuts, seeds, legumes, grains as well. So having that diversity of all of them is what helps. I don't like tracking, but sometimes you do have to kind of do it at the beginning just to get a bit of a rough idea. But as I've said, like if you are crowding in, so you're adding seeds onto your salad, you're adding chickpeas into your lunch or something, that's kind of the best way of increasing your fiber intake. And just having that diversity as well. But I think you're so right. I mean, my kind of big things are like fiber, protein, and plant points in my recipes, because I do think those are the key kind of areas to hit and the kind of like the positive goals rather than saying under X amount of calories or under X amount of fat or something. I think they're like the positive kind of goals to have in each meal. But I think, yes, so many people are lacking fiber. And I think that's mainly because of the amount of processed food people are eating. They're choosing white bread, processed meat, all these sorts of things that are really, really low in fiber. And I think when you're increasing your protein, try as much as possible to have protein from whole natural sources rather than from like bars or powders as much, because they are also much easier to eat with fiber rich foods. Whereas if you're just constantly eating like a protein bar for breakfast, snack, dinner, or whatever, it's quite hard to add in all those other aspects and the other nutrition goals that you have.
To close off, I want to ask, what is one of the best pieces of life advice that anyone's ever given you?
So it was when I was 22 and I was moving back from Sydney. So I went to university in Sydney. and I was moving back to London, and I was starting up my food blog, and I was like, I want to do this food blog, but I don't know. Like I feel like it's already been done, which is so funny to think that then, because like no one was doing it. And this friend of mine sat me down and he said, but do you know what? There's only one you, Maddie, and you will bring something different to the world that no one else can. And that's something that I have held in my heart the whole way through, because I think like it wasn't even like it's so funny to think back in what 2012 that I got this advice, that I thought that it was busy compared to the market now. I mean, there's a million people doing a million different of the same things, but I do think that that's such an important thing to remember, is like we are all so unique, and we have a different perspective and a different voice and a different, upbringing and childhood and experience and view and perspective on things. And I think all you have to do is tap into that, find out what your view, perspective, authenticity, voice is, and just keep going with that. It's so easy to compare yourself. It's so easy to think that it's been done, but I do really believe that we're all authentic and different, and we have to kind of lean into that.
And that links wonderfully with the whole conversation that we've been having about finding your authenticity and your identity and who you want to be and what you actually want to portray in this world. So how lovely to kind of tie it all together in that kind of final statement. That was very well thought out.
I mean, it wasn't on purpose. That is just the advice I was given. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it definitely worked. And I think, and like you said, it's exhausting not being authentic. So, life's hard enough already. Let's make it a bit easier.
Yeah, let's be ourselves in it. And if people want to follow you online, Madeleine, and keep up to date with what you're doing or work with you, where should they go?
So yeah, if you come and find me on social media, I'm Madeleine_Shaw_, which has got lots of like recipes, health tips. And then I have a digital platform called the Glow Space, which is movement, meditation, and meal planning. So it's about bringing wellness to your home. I think I mentioned I'm a mum, and I probably like 2 3 years into being a mom, I realized I hadn't like exercised for 3 years, and I was like, oh my god. And I think the Glow Space was very much inspired of like making wellness fit in with your life. So if you're not someone who's got the time to go to an hour and a half yoga class at lunchtime, or the funds to have a reformer membership, I kind of built the Glow Space as something that, planned out your meals for the week. It's got lots of movement under 30 minutes and meditations as well. And it's about kind of 360 wellness that you can do from home to, yeah, look after yourself and get your glow on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining today, Madeleine. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.